Ladies and gentlemen, dear students, dear alumni, dear friends, stakeholders of the MCI, I hope you're healthy and safe wherever you may be now. We have been celebrating our Jubilee year, 25 years of MCI, and welcoming distinguished guests from all over the world, chief executives, the former president of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, presidents, scientists, and so on. And today, for this academic semester, it is another and actually the final highlight of our distinguished guests. Let me briefly welcome, but with all my positive emotion, the former president of the European Commission, the former prime minister of the Republic of Italy, the former president, chief executive of Ferrari, and many other functions. A very, very warm welcome to you, a dear friend of the MCI, dear Romano. Sono veramente lieto darti il benvenuto.
Thank you. Look, I don't lie. I'm very happy to be with you because when I was in Innsbruck, it was for me a day of joy and admiration. And so in 25 years, you did more, maybe more what Bologna University did in 900 years, you know, or 1,000 almost years, you know. And clearly, I wish you will have the same success in the next 25 years. And, because you deserve it, and I think that is a clear message of looking at the future. As we have today the obligation to give a short idea of what will be the future of Europe, very short, 10 minutes, then we shall debate about it, you know. And so I hope not to be too boring in these 10 minutes and describe what I think is the essential of our, let's say, of the European role in the world.
Thank you so much, caro Romano. Before we give the floor to you, let me briefly also welcome our honorary professor at the MCI, another high-level guest we have, and a dear friend of the MCI. So this is actually a friend's circle today. Let me welcome Franz Fischler, who was a member of the European Commission, who was Minister of Agriculture, who was president of the European Forum Alpbach, and many other functions. Great to have you with us, dear Franz.
Hello to everyone, and thank you very much indeed for the kind invitation to participate in this discussion, especially to see again, at least on the screen, Romano Prodi, because as everybody knows, we were together in the European Commission, and it's always good to meet the former boss.
Dear Romano, you have been such a long-standing friend of our university, also a personal friend. My wife, I'm not sure whether she likes me saying this, but she's still in love with you, and our university and our students so nicely remember your being here, and we are still very, very excited about your visit.
Don't repeat it, because maybe I come back.
We would be more than pleased. So
I think you are welcome anytime in Innsbruck and in Tirol.
Okay. Look, very few message for the future of Europe. The future of Europe depends upon Europe. And in theory, we are still leading in the world. we have a lot of problems, a lot of weakness, a lot of tension, but we are still number one in industrial production in the world. China will overpass us, but we are still number one, and we are still number one, what is even much more important, in welfare state. US and China, they are much more powerful, but in terms of distribution of income, we are not certainly paradise, but we are not, let's say, we are much better than the most powerful protagonist of the world politics. And look, we are in front of a change of the world competition. Value chain is changing after COVID and after the Trump years and the tension between China and the United States. Not only reshoring, but the future will be repatriating some new investments. And so Europe, from the economic point of view, will become more and more important because the increase of costs of China, the disruption of the value chain because of COVID, there have been an alarm on the total globalization we had in the past. Globalization will not stop because the link between China and the US is too deep now. And there is no interest to break up it. My point is that in the high-tech industries or high-tech services, there will be war. There will be breakup between China and the US. But in all middle high technology also, but not linked with dual use or military use or supremacy, the market will still open, even if not open as in the past. So there will be a mild reshoring and a more important role of Europe because of that. Second, it's in my forecast is that in terms of military tension, they will be very high. I don't see any probability of war, but military expenditure and an enormous research in this field will be a characteristic of both of the United States and China. On the European, going into Europe, the progress we have done in the last year with the next generation EU will go on. You know that there are two different opinions. One that we shall go back to normality in the future and no more, let's say, solidarity among European countries. I do think that this link will go on in the future, but very few progress will be done in foreign policy and in military policy, because there is something that is, let's say, putting brakes on European policy, and this is the veto right that we have now in the European Council. The veto rights will put big obstacles on progress even in fiscal policy. As you know, there are paradises even inside the European Union. This will be different, let's say, taxation behaviors will remain because of veto rights that will make very difficult to have changed. There will be progress in some specific fields, but not on a field in which I know that everybody of us is interested, let's say migration rules. Even the meeting of last week meeting was difficult because it's very sensible on internal policy of many European countries. So we shall assist to some compromise, but not a change of policy. But we have, because of that, we have to change our African policy. This I am convinced that we shall depend on Africa in any case, because the boom of Africa population is unavoidable. It's going on in an incredible speed. And the new mass communication is pushing young African generation to go and to try to increase the pressure on the European shores. And so it's, but we have to do an active policy, you know. For example, we are talking in the university, in a university environment. I was proposing to a mixed university between Europe, South Europe and North Africa, having all the old relations that we had 1 century ago. You have to know that 1 century ago, the familiarity between France, Italy, Greece, Spain, and Africa was much, much more than now. You know, there were dozens of thousands of Italians and French people living in Africa, and now we have to work with a new policy, not only of economic aid, but exchange of technology, because, you know, in spite of everything, Africa is growing more than Europe, but starting from such a low level and with such an increase of population that for quite a few decades, migration will be a priority of Africans, and for us will be one of the major problems. So this is the very brief scenarios, and last point is, as you understand, trade policy of Europe is different from the American one. We have to be linked with US. We belong to the same political area with the same concept of democracy. but we have very different economic interests. And to mediate between these two aspects is difficult, is really difficult. And you have to know that last year, European trade with the United States was the same than European trade with China. It's an incredible situation. 10 years ago, it was impossible to imagine that. And so we have to be very clear with the solidarity with the United States, but also to understand that our interests are also going to East also. And Austria is a very interesting case, because Austria has always been a bridge, clearly a natural bridge for East Europe or for Russia, but also a bridge for East. And we have to help each other to be very clear on our political belonging, but also a clear message that we have also our own interests.
Thank you so much, dear Romano, for this opening presentation, for your opening keynote. Now, before I hand the word to Franz Fischler for an initial question, I would like to encourage the audience to send questions to me, and I will be happy to present them to Romano Prodi as much as I can. And how to send in your questions, just drop me a note to livetalk@mci.edu. I'll repeat, livetalk@mci.edu, and I will receive the questions here on my screen and put them forward as much as I can. Now, thank you so much once again, dear Romano. Franz, is there any comments? Is there any question already coming into your mind?
Well, not so much comments. I think it is really good that we start with questions so that we can have a dialogue. And therefore, I would like to go back to the very beginning when you, Romano, mentioned that Europe is still the number one. And you made a comparison with our economic position, but even more that we are the number one as far as human welfare is concerned. And this is absolutely right. We have by far the widest and deepest catalog of basic rights, fundamental rights, and including also many social rights. So therefore, we could be proud about us. But my question is now, why is there such a discrepancy between facts, what we are and how we are, and on the other hand, our own interpretation and our own reception? So is there a lack of self-confidence for Europeans, or what are other reasons why we are not much more prepared to play a leading role in the world as Europeans?
No, I'm sorry to answer that this is a reality, because I thought that we are economically very, very important, but politically absolutely inexistent, But I'll give you an example. Libya, 70 kilometers from the island of Lampedusa, from Italy. Who is Lord of Libya? Russia and Turkey. And look, they together make 20% of European GDP, less than 20% of European GDP. In theory, they don't trade much with Libya. They don't invest so much. Turkey a bit, Russia nothing. And they are totally in command. Why? Because we are divided. We cannot have a common foreign policy. And this is the result. Look, politics is decision-making. And if you go to a foreign policy meeting and then you have different opinions and you don't take one simple decision, it's, what I learned, as you know, from our common political experience in politics, you have to simplify and to arrive soon to ja oder nein, and we never arrive to that. And foreign policy is decision-making. So there is no contradiction. We are wealthy, but absolutely weak. And look, in case of danger, weakness is weakness.
Right. This would be exactly my other question, which I would like to put to you, related to foreign and security policy. Yes, you're absolutely right. We ourselves are putting brakes because we still continue with the unanimity principle in the decision-making in foreign and security policy. And as long as this continues, I think the opportunity to introduce a powerful foreign policy as a union is very, very difficult. So my question is, do you have any suggestion how it would be possible to change the constitution so that we could have more majority voting within the European Council?
Even with the existing rules, you may have some exception, but not so important. And so I shall be blunt. You will change it only with a deep crisis. We change it in economy because of the crisis. And I don't wish to have a political crisis, but you ask me to be very open and blunt, and this is what I think, if you have not. But can you believe that what I thought about Libya, the same in Ethiopia, we have so deep links, also sympathy. But by Libyans, they don't hate Europe. And Russia and Turkey. And look, but in the same time, the power is going to east. And the new agreement of Asian trade agreement that is now implementing will cover 1/3 of total world economy. Can you believe how things are moving, And even, look, Russia, Soviet Union was the master of China. Now, if I analyze as an economist the relation between China and Russia, I find that China is growing 1 Russia per year.
Mm-hmm.
1 Russia per year. And so we are in some way controlled in the regional policy by countries that are in the world policy, not number one, not number two. This is really my consideration.
Romano, do you have a question, Franz? Because I keep getting questions.
I wanted to hand over to you, but before I do it, I would like to say that I fully agree with Romano's position. On the other hand, it is a real pity that a crisis, a deep crisis, is needed to change things to the better. I mean, this has not much to do with human rationale. Yeah?
Look, I am deeply Catholic. I believe in miracles also.
Okay, me too. So, Andreas.
Yeah, actually,
my guest.
I think we all need to believe in miracles, being Catholic or not, because elsewise I think we will be in troubles. Anyhow, there is a question. A question has come in by Fritz Meyerhofer, and he's an MCI alumnus presently in Frankfurt. And the question relates to Turkey. How should the European Commission or Europe in general deal with Turkey?
Well, I do know you are Austrian, and look, it was when there was a decision in 1999 to start negotiation with Turkey. Nobody knew that. Was Chirac, the French president, said, look, we start negotiation. And we were in Helsinki, said, look, negotiation, why not? Only the Austrian chancellor said, remember the Vienna. So history is, and we started negotiation in a good faith, but with prudence. I thought, I agreed to negotiate, but we shall need 30 years. The Turkish Prime Minister told me, why 30 years? My answer was because when my grandmother, there was something frightful, terrible, she used to say, Mamali Turki. So we have to adapt and adjust. Mm-hmm. But then things changed. Inside Turkey. Negotiations were difficult even in the beginning because many European politicians, they were against, starting from the German Chancellor, who told me, Romano, in the primary school, you had a very ignorant teacher because Anatolia is in Asia, not in Turkey, not in Europe, But, negotiations started, but then Turkey politics has changed. Mm. Now, Turkey is a regional power, as I hinted before, and there is no possibility of any membership of the European Union. It's necessary to have a trade agreement as we have now, to have cooperation and an open policy, because Turkey is a great country, but now the split is too deep.
Mm-hmm. You have been referring to 1529 when Ottomans were in front of Vienna, and also in 1683, and it took a Polish, joint effort, European effort to deal with it. So that's very nice to remember.
The Austrian Chancellor was the only one to remember in the European Council. Remember. But history.
Remember history. Franz, do you have a question? I keep getting questions in.
Yeah. Just an additional question related to the future of the relationship between Europe and Turkey. Because, as Romano rightly said, a lot of things on the Turkish side have changed in the recent years. And for me, I must say, it is now rather unclear whether the interest to become a member of the European Union is still there, or whether it has gone. How do you see that, Romano?
Sorry, no, I didn't understand.
How do you see it? Is there still an interest on the Turkish side to become a member of the European Union, or is Erdogan more of the opinion,
Well,
what you mentioned, that Turkey is now a regional power and can't be a member anymore of the European Union, can only be at the same level as the European Union as such?
yes, I don't see any possibility, because when you analyze Turkish foreign policy in Central Asia, in Syria, in Libya, in all the area, all the oil problem in the Mediterranean, is a total autonomous policy. So I don't see, as far as I can make forecasts, I don't see any possibility of membership in the European Union. But because we are here to speak freely, the borders of Union, how I see the future borders of Union, all the former Yugoslavian countries and Albania stop. And of course, why I see that? Because otherwise Serbia or they will bring a lot of problems and so on. And you have to be clear where the future borders are. But, and altogether they make 1% of European GDP or 2% maximum, So I don't see problem, even if with so many member states we have to change the composition of the Commission and the rules of the Council. But we have to change in any case. But then we have to build what we, France, proposed in 2002 to have around Europe, from Belarus to Israel to Morocco, the so-called Ring of Friends. Let's say to make bilateral agreements, case by case, in order that Europe is in a frame of friendship. And with Turkey, we have this already, and we have to take care of it, deepen it, but no more any membership,
Romano, if we look a bit further towards the south, we speak then about Africa. And you mentioned in your speech that it would be absolutely necessary to change the African policy of the European Union. I think this is absolutely right. But the question is, in which direction should it be changed? And an additional very simple question, which is often raised, why is it possible that the Chinese are, with their African policy, much more successful than we Europeans? Also, the Chinese try to exploit Africa as much as they can, and we send a lot of development cooperation money to Africa. Why is this contradiction?
Oh, this is very simple. China has an African policy. They have diplomatic relations with 53 countries, and the total 54 countries. And to have diplomatic relations means oblige countries to cut relation with Taiwan, and is a change. And you have no policy. When there was an Africa problem, you remember where till now, look, if it was a French-speaking country, we given a role to France to mediate and to do that. If it was an English formal commonwealth, we did the same. We have no policy. And the result is, look, if you go to Addis Ababa, there is a skyscraper, the headquarters of Africa Union, a nice place, and there is a small scripture, gift of the Chinese people to the African people. Stop. And second, remember that China needs Africa. Needs, because they have 20% of population, world population, and 6-7% of arable land. The same is raw material, the same is energy. And neither United States nor Europe needs Africa in such a deep way. Mm-hmm. And, you know, this is the problem. This is the foreign policy of China, is Africa, Latin America, in order to have raw materials, to have what they need. Right. And so political situation and economic reality.
Andreas, tell us some opinions of the audience.
Yeah, Romano, I have a number of questions, and one is a very short one, and because you have been touching China briefly now and the China-African relationship. Now, Eva Lichtenberger, she was a member of the European Parliament, a member of the Tyrolean Regional Parliament, and so on, and she asks, Eva Lichtenberger, she was a member of the European Parliament for the Green Party, a very early Green member coming from Austria in the European Parliament. Yeah? Very early one. I just recently met her.
She's perfect in Italian.
Hmm?
She speaks perfectly well Italian.
Mm-hmm. But she presented the question in English, and it goes: there has been always a long-standing and deep relationship between Italy and China. Do you think this will deepen in the next years or be more distant?
No, the European, the Italian policy vis-à-vis China will follow the German and French. We have no possibility of having a different policy. If you look at trade and investments, Germany and let's say in some way German policy is so dominant in the relation with China that only if we agree we may have a deepening of the relation with China. There is no possibility of. And China also made a mistake when invented the 17+1, you know, dividing Europe, an agreement with 9 members of the European Union and 8 European countries, non-members, to have some sort of specific institutional relation. This was not a proper choice, because Europe is the old Europe. You know, Europe is Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Austria, and if you have not these countries, you will create problems, not solve problems. And remember, something that was incredible and important during the passage from Trump to the new president, Europe has signed an investment agreement with China. And this was not an agreement, but was a very interesting project of converging, with institutions controlling patents, scientific policy, government aid, and so on. And but with the new American presidency, there was a deep resentment against that, and sanctions, and also sanctions against European members of parliament. And now the agreement will never be ratified, never, in the present situation. And so the European policy vis-à-vis China is complicated by this situation. We have, as I told before, different interests from Americans, but in the political tension we have today, it's not easy to express a European policy as it was possible only a few months ago.
Romano, when we speak about the relations between Europe and China, then immediately the Silk Road concept pops up. How do you see this concept about the Silk Road? Is this a concept which is useful for both sides and which should be followed up? Or is there more risk than opportunity?
I am very frank. When the Silk Road was proposed, I was strongly in favor, but as all Europeans, remember that the Chinese proposal was linked with the Investment and Infrastructure Bank, and all the European countries signed the agreement, even the United Kingdom, because it was a new link. But how developed this? It was in the years Chinese development. And so now it's difficult to say, look, this is a change of relation between China and Europe, because there was no role of European companies, of European government. And I also proposed in think tank with China, well, we don't do something politically possible, neutral. Let's say, why we don't build together 20 hospitals in Ethiopia, for example, to give the idea that in spite of tension, we in some way work together, help Africa, and we don't give any suspicion to our American friends, And but there is no political decision-making process on all these ideas. And so Silk Road is a Chinese interesting proposal, but only Chinese,
Mm-hmm. May I come in here with a question actually being asked or being sent to me by two people. One is a professor at the MCI, and he holds a Jean Monnet chair on European values. And the other one is an MCI alumnus called Dominic Hötzl, and both refer more or less to the same topic. Now, what would you suggest? How should the European Union prevent the selling out of European companies to Chinese investors?
Well, it depends which companies, for example, to sell real estate, I'm always happy because money's come and real estate don't get out. And in some cases, it's necessary for a company to have this link. But as you have seen with KUKA in Germany, you can have tension because you export technology and not only you have income. So it depends upon the specific case. In any, because we underestimate the situation in which the Chinese market that makes a company powerful. You can start with Volkswagen, how important is Chinese market now. You go to fashion. In this case, even, let's say, capital arrangement may be useful. I am happy when are both sides, not only in one side. And in the future, I think that there will be not, let's say, investments in high-tech, dual military and civilian possible use, and high-tech communication in this field. But I think that there will be still interesting agreement. But don't forget the change in terms of cost of labor. Chinese cost of labor has increased so much that in Shanghai you pay, let's say, graduate the same or more than you pay in Milan. Of course, not in order. And so there will be different exchange of investments, not in high tech and not anymore China as a factor of the world, but using, for example, Vietnam or Ethiopia or making, having the role of China before.
Well, unfortunately, our time is running, but we should try to discuss a little bit also some other political aspects outside foreign policy. And you, Romano, mentioned in your introduction the trade policy. And therefore, I would like to put to you a very simple question. After we have overcome Trumpism, and after Trumpism, the period of Mr. Trump is over, in other words, and we are establishing new relations with the new American president. Don't you think that it would be now the right time that Europe takes new initiatives in the context of the WTO to improve the trade relations, to go back to multilateralism and to overcome a bit the bilateralism and to make progress towards better rules for international trade, especially also in the context of the Green Deal?
Look, not easy in this moment to revive or reform WTO. You know how it was difficult in the recent past, and now it's even more difficult because of the new competition I hinted before. You know, and even you mentioned the green, the environment policy we didn't mention before. But this is a very interesting chapter because Europe, we have been in the forefront. You remember how we worked to approve the Kyoto Protocol that was the beginning of international cooperation against United States and China together against it, you know, and how Europe was in the forefront for the new environmental policy. But if we don't make a really jump in technology, we cannot deliver in this field. France, because think to solar energy. For example, in Italy, we adopted a lot of it with a lot of public incentive. So we spent more than 15 billion euros incentive for solar energy, but everything manufactured in China, everything. We cannot repeat it. Mm-hmm. So we have European Parliament. I agree on European policy in putting strong goals, and but I don't see the same progress in European technology in this field. If we don't do the same, people will kill us. Mm-hmm. Because energy policy and environmental policy needs investments, need an increase in productivity, in technology. Mm-hmm. I am not so confident, that we are doing the same progress.
Romano, when we've just been speaking about a very, very important issue, the Green Deal, and it has to do with European values and the concept how to shape the world. Now, one question has been coming in from Verena Ringler, and it has to do with European values. Now, I may just read it. Dear Romano, thank you so much for being with us today. 20 years ago, you were president of the European Commission at that time. At that time, for the first time, different ideas on values to bilateral sanctions against an EU member state government, the newly formed Austrian coalition, were placed. If you were president of the European Commission today, how would you deal with governments that openly undermine or even refuse to accept some of the fundamental European rights and values?
Well, you remember me an episode that you cannot, I never told anybody, but when there was a problem with Austria, I had such a terrible pressure from Chirac to put sanctions, and early in the morning, say, and my point was very clear. I shall never put sanctions on principle, only on political actions, because the freedom of speech, I always free. And so I should adopt the same policy now. Well, in principle, I am against all sanctions. You know, when you put sanction on Eritrea, as we are doing now, we simply create problems. And even inside Europe, you know, I think that if you clearly think that you have different basic values that are absolutely incompatible, you break up. But to put sanction, you only make things worse. This is my general principle, except some very peculiar situation, you know. And so my position with the mild tension, but intense but short tension with Austria, I should do the same thing now, you know. And I repeat, it was not easy because France was really pushing me, but then in a few days, the situation was. But I simply told, look, if Austria makes sins against, let's say, human behavior and so on, we may think to sanction. But if you deviate if you have a different policy, I don't put sanction.
Romano, I think at this point it is really necessary to remember what happened in these days in the beginning of the year 2000, because thanks to you and thanks to your initiative, these sanctions against Austria never became European sanctions. It was a pure bilateral action, and you made sure in the Commission that the Commission, the next day when the member states introduced these sanctions, decided that the relation between Austria and the European Union will be kept intact and not changed, and no sanctions from the Commission side would be introduced. And this is thanks to you. So I think,
remember, because there is a difference between Commission and Council, you know. In Council, states fight, and the Commission must.
Therefore, it was a pure intergovernmental action.
Yeah. But I don't want to be a hero, because I was not a hero, but the pressure was incredible. Mm-hmm. Probably there were also personal tensions, you know, because this is politics, but there were really pressures. Anyway.
We unfortunately
now there is a very deep political problem. Germany or UK or England?
You know, a fundamental problem.
It's a fundamental problem now, you know. And
I have been.
Our French students, they will abandon us and will go to the big match.
I think I have been receiving at least 10 questions on the game, the football game between Germany and England, but you have been already mentioning it. Thank you so much, dear Romano Prodi.
The solution of the problem is to leave the students go to look at the match.
Yeah. Thank you so much, dear Romano Prodi. Non posso esprimere la nostra gratitudine per essere con noi. I cannot express our gratitude for having been with us. Sei stato un amico personale di lunga data della nostra università e anche da noi. Thank you so much for being our friend. And I think we need to leave you off because you are also a great football fan and have so many obligations. I only would like to invite you and to encourage you. You know that you always have a place. You will always be in our hearts and be at home at our university. Once again, thank you so much. Also to you, dear Franz Fischler, for sharing your thoughts, bringing in your expertise, bringing in questions, and both of you shaping Europe. I'm not sure whether the young generation can have even an idea what you have been realizing, how much Europe has changed. And at the time when you were in the European Commission, Austria was just about to join. Austria was freshly joined, and you know, we had borders, 40 kilometers south, 50 kilometers north, all the restriction, all the complexities when studying, when going abroad, when bringing in goods, when selling goods, when traveling, currencies, all that. So thank you so much to both of you for shaping Europe.
It was Franz Fischler.
Romano, don't lie in the end of our discussion. It was you.
Really, I had remember how we worked well together. It was incredible because in politics, generally, you fight each other. In the Commission, we had a deep European feeling, common European feeling.
One still can feel it. Thank you so much. Also, thanks to all our partners, our media partners, our event partners, our students, alumni, stakeholders, and so on. Thanks for allowing us shaping Europe jointly with you within 25 years. And perhaps to give you an idea about the fall, we will be happy to welcome Mr. Lech Walesa in the fall, and also Mrs. Kolinda Graba-Kitarovic, the former president of Croatia, has announced her willingness to be with us. So let's believe in Europe, let's shape Europe, and for tonight, all the best. Enjoy the game. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, friends. Thank you.
Thank you.